All right, folks, welcome back to Site Selectors for People 2. This is Devin Hillsdon-Smith, your host, and we are in Season 2 of the podcast. I appreciate you all joining me again. Hope everybody has been well. To my friends, everybody's listening. Hi, Mom. I'm pleased to say that today we're going to make good on a promise that I made at the end of last season, that we're going to spend more time speaking to those individuals that I meet on the road, right, that I get to know in our communities around the country. And I'm pleased to say that today we are joined by Keith Lambert, a community leader who's making a significant impact in his community at the Lansing Economic Area Partnership. Keith, how are you, buddy?
Devin, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
Absolutely. I appreciate you being here. You're a busy man. COO of the entire LEAP organization. You have a secondary title, VP of Business Attraction, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's kind of transitioning, but I still lead the department that does all the investment attraction, business recruitment activities right now.
So you are uniquely focused both internally and externally in your role.
I think that's a fair way to say, yeah. Personnel, organizational things, but then also projects, hunting the next jobs and investments. So it's kind of fun to wear dual hats.
Absolutely. Well, you've got a third hat now, right? You've got a more important title, father.
I do.
Yeah. Keith, you are a new father, man. How's that going?
Yeah, had a baby girl about 6 weeks ago. Wife and I are doing great. We're both off work for a while. I know we'll talk a little bit about that. And the return to work is kind of looming. I still have a month, but it's been it's been great. It's a whole different perspective on life and work and, just changing how we think about living, which is kind of cool.
That's right. I was supposed to deliver a message. You're actually not needed back in the office. So you don't need to go back. No, I'm kidding. You play such a critical role, man. I'm sure they're dying for you to get back in the office. But just kind of we'll dig into that.
We're a team of 15 and some contractors and interns and things. But it's a team of let's say 20-ish all in. It's a lot when somebody leaves for multiple months.
Absolutely.
That doesn't just happen. It takes pre-planning and people stepping up and role assignment, role understanding. So yeah, it's a heavy lift, but I'm really glad to have such a great team.
Well, and speaking of leaving and coming back, that's kind of been your career path as well, right? You were 2 gigs ago was a Tri-County Development Manager for LEAP. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, when I was actually 22 years old. It was my first full-time job out of college that I got the Tri-County Development Manager gig at LEAP back in 2014. And I was there for 2.5 years. And then I really liked the investment attraction, business recruitment, the hunting type part of economic development. So I found an opportunity down in South Carolina with Charleston County Economic Development and went down there and was only there a year and a half. And then I got pulled back because my former boss and current boss, Bob Trezise, our CEO, really saw a lot of potential in me, I'd say, and also liked the idea that I had learned South Carolina's kind of system. Charleston and South Carolina are always kicking butt in economic development. So he's like, let's bring all that new intel you got back to Michigan and come lead my business attraction team.
That's a brilliant strategy. Take your employees, fire them, tell them to go get gigs in states that you compete against,
yeah,
and then
send them out back.
Diaspora
or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
The diaspora. Bingo. Yep. So you were there, you went away, you came back into this new role. And you're in Lansing, which is known as America's best big small city, right?
That's what we like to say. Yeah, it's a region that LEAP covers is a tri-county area, about 500,000 people, right in the center of the state. In Michigan, we always use our hand as a map, and we're right in the center of the palm. We're within an hour of every major metro area, and 3 hours from the Mackinac Bridge and the beautiful Upper Peninsula, an hour or so from Lake Michigan, and yeah, it's kind of right at the center of it all in Michigan.
Well, in the center of power, right? It's the state capital.
Yes.
You've got state government there, Michigan State University.
Over 50,000 students.
Over 50,000 students, man. That's a lot of kids coming and going.
It is. Keeping them here is a big effort to help retain more and more every year. We're doing well in the last decade or two, but I'll also say playing from behind a little bit.
Well, but let's be real, right? You're the car capital of the world, and when you have wins, this is fascinating to me, right? the wins that you've had recently have been huge, absolutely huge. And those are new, cutting edge, emerging industry jobs, right? All around electric vehicle supply chain. You had a project that maybe would be a little more traditional with Norm Fasteners, right? $77 million foreign direct investment, 200
literally
jobs.
Nuts and bolts of the automotive industry. And
the nuts and bolts. I love it. And then you've got the big one, right? So was it $6.5 billion across both the GM investment and the Ultium battery plant?
Yes, yeah, it's kind of the whole GM ecosystem, but Ultium is, it's a joint venture of General Motors, but it's LG, and it's very much battery making, and yes, they primarily supply General Motors, but it's a whole new landscape in the world of, it's not bending metal and plastics and things. It's making batteries. It's chemical engineering. 100%. So that's been amazing to land that project. And then obviously it bodes well for our 2 assembly plants we have in the Lansing area too.
Absolutely. And that's 4,000 new jobs, right? So now you're starting to eat away at those 50,000 students, right?
Yeah. Just got to find the pathways. Yeah.
So how you have to find the pathways. So that's a great segue there. So you basically have to serve as workforce developers as well, right? You've got your workforce partners. But you get pulled into workforce development and pipeline strategies more and more, right? So
very much.
What are you all doing to be innovative in this realm, seeing that you have this massive labor supply, right, coming from MSU? You've got all these brand new jobs coming in. How are you connecting the front to the back of the napkin?
I think it's really about partnership and having trust with the different relationships. Because like you said, I mean, we're an economic development organization. We have workforce development organizations right in our backyard. From, Capital Area Michigan Works, which is the part of the statewide Michigan Works. That's what they do. They literally do workforce development. So they're kind of primarily running some of the different programs and things, but we have to be that connector, that, making the referral, but also just not dropping a handoff, of when we land a project. It's part of the proposal that there's workforce development incentives, but once the deal is struck, I mean, it takes years to really implement, and execution is everything on actually training people, using these grants, using these credits effectively. It takes bandwidth and a company consultants understanding how it works, but then it takes the people, that are implementing, acting as fiduciary for the funds and designing training programs. So it's a full-fledged effort. And Lansing Community College has a business community institute that is very much a workforce development organization. So those two are really critical. With Michigan State, that's primarily the engineering level talent, a lot of MBAs, the business operational side, HR, comms, marketing, tech, all that will come with, but a lot of it's technician engineers for these projects like Altium, for instance. And out of that, it's like 75-80% are the technicians. So the engineering talent from MSU is great, but I think the cultivation and grassroots nature of it is the technician piece is really important. And that can be associates, that can be, accelerated trainings dedicated to battery making. And that's what we've kind of worked on with the state, with LCC, with some different partners to hone these brand new programs. We actually just recently announced through the Department of Labor, we had the labor secretary as well as the energy secretary come in to Lansing, Michigan, to announce a new DOL registered apprenticeship program in battery making, essentially. So that was really cool. That's something we're piloting for the whole country. But brand new apprenticeship program that they wanted to announce in Lansing because they know they're doing a great job with LCC and Michigan Works here in our market. So that's pretty exciting.
You've got some really strong partners up there.
Yeah.
Then, right? I mean, and we'll get into that when it comes to regionalism. But before I do, I mean, you are one of those strong partners, right? So I want to talk about you for a second.
Yeah.
So we kind of talked about your career in economic development, but how did you get into that first job, right? I get calls from folks all the time asking, how do I even get into this industry?
Yeah.
So how did you find it?
It's so fascinating. Economic development is a funny thing. Some industries are just like this, but no one goes to school I'm going to be an economic development practitioner. No one even knows what it is.
No.
I think I was a weird example. I talked to a lot of people that are they kind of fell into it. They knew someone that really liked it and they got an opportunity. But I was more academically driven towards something like economic development. I didn't know what that job actually was, but I went to school. I was initially going to be pre-law, and so I went to a really great public affairs program, Michigan State University.
As a lawyer myself, Can I just say that you
Yeah.
dodged a bullet there?
I dodged a bullet. Well, the funny thing is I met all these pre-law kids and I was like having breakfast with them because it was a residential college my freshman year. And they were all just like wanting to talk about policy and, you know, the political theory, constitutional democracy was one of the majors in my college. And I'm like, international relations sounds way more interesting to me personally. And I'm not like these pre-law people. So I figured that out pretty quickly, which was great. And I loved all the business side, the economic and financial side of international relations. So that was kind of, that's my major. But then I took more and more econ classes. And luckily I came in with my macro and micro from AP classes in high school. So I was able to jump right into international my freshman year, international economics. And I loved it. And then at my sophomore year, I was able to take an international development course. And that kind of got me into thinking like, this is fascinating, like the economies of developing worlds and trying to go from here to here and bring all this prosperity and wealth building for, all people and institutions. Do elites control all this where none of the wealth actually goes down to the lower classes? Like a lot of things like that just fascinated me, and looking at specific countries and, how did a country go from here to here where this other country's been sputtering down here? So it was very kind of national in scope. And then when I started looking for jobs, I realized that like this stuff I was studying in like Southeast Asia was a focus area, like Indonesia and Bangladesh. And I'm like, all these same things apply to my local community.
They all apply to home as well.
Yeah. And I found an internship with the Community Economic Development Association of Michigan, a mouthful, CEDM is their acronym. And there I was working on micro enterprise development. They had a Michigan Rural Council that I eventually was coordinating, kind of went from like unpaid intern to paid intern to contractor leading some of their statewide initiatives. So I kind of climbed the ranks there, and it was still part-time. And that was when, that was statewide. And that was even more like localized. I'm like, what is this LEAP organization? They were a member of CEDM and doing things right in Lansing, East Lansing, and the broader area that I called home for, 5 years at that point through my college years. And I'm like, this sounds really cool. And it was also a full-time job with, nice benefits and making some real money. So a little bit more security. And, I just felt like I had more to do in Lansing when I graduated. I didn't want to spend my 4 years in East Lansing and then bounce. And I found that opportunity with LEAP, and then had an amazing 2.5 years of sponging information and learning the profession, and 3 different mentors that all were tremendous for me. And I was able to kind of get myself on a trajectory of pretty amazing career growth just over a few years.
That's going to be the verb of the podcast, sponging. I like that.
Oh, yeah.
You spend the time
I'm huge
sponging.
about sponging. I've been doing a lot of hiring lately, and in interviews, I'm like, people ask, like, what are the keys to success? I'm like, figure out a way to, you have to have a thirst for knowledge, but also then like a capacity to sponge it up, right? Right. If it's in one ear, out the other, but you're interested in it, like that's, the retention is really important. So I think it's like interest, but then just having that capacity to like hold new information, learn new things. That's so important because we're not a huge organization. We're 15 people. Right. Everyone, there's not really entry level in the traditional sense. Like people within a few months of being hired are expected to wrangle like big, serious programs and projects and $1 million grants and things that involve external partners. And there's not really pencil pushing jobs at LEAP. It's just we're too spread thin across trying to do a lot of good work for the community.
You're in a great position to even have 15 people, right? Think about how many economic development organizations are around the country that are trying to survive with a staff of 2.
Exactly. Well, and when I was hired, we went from 8 to 11. So it's been, that was 2014. So it's been a story of kind of pretty consistent growth over the years. And we're a public-private partnership. So that comes out of membership, mostly private sector investment into our regional prosperity mission, and then also more contracts with public sector partners. So we have contracts with 2 of the 3 counties in our region. And that allows us to do more micro level services for Ingham County and for Clinton County. So that's kind of the model we're working with now. We had for a long time, we were the economic development department for the city of Lansing. That is no more. So that's been kind of a model shift too. But that's part of what's interesting about LEAP, I think, is we're a public-private partnership, but we were a little less traditional in doing contracts for services with some of our government partners.
Yeah, and so let's just dig straight into that, right? We're talking about regionalism when you mention that, right? And regionalism, I've talked in this podcast typically about the traditional side of economic development, which is that county level economic developer,
Yep.
right? Or somebody
BRE
working
attraction.
BRE, right? Attraction, somebody working maybe at the state level. We've delved a
Yep.
little bit into the utilities, which that's always interesting to me, how they can do so much work as economic developers within utility and only have like a staff of 3 and they're covering like
Yeah.
5 states.
Mhm.
Gosh. But regionalism is such a hard concept, right? Because I think us as human beings, we define our locality based on our neighborhood, right?
Mhm.
Our commuting patterns. Maybe you identify yourself as a resident of the city of Lansing. You don't think of the greater Lansing area as kind of
Right.
being, what you identify with. Maybe you've got taxing boundaries and political boundaries
Mhm.
that silo everything up. And so how do you describe then when you're covering 3 different counties, right? And you've had a contract with one area and that's no longer, and now you've got contracts with the 2 other, but you're still supporting the third, right? Because
Yep.
that's the city of Lansing, that's your mothership,
Mhm.
if you
Oh
will.
yeah. Urban
How do you
core.
describe what strong regionalism looks like?
Well, I would say a lot of it has to do with the trust in the partners, and being an effective bridge between the public sector, the governments, and quasi-government type entities, DDAs and EDCs and things like that are local, and then the private sector, which has its own means and wants to see growth for profit motivation, customer acquisition, their own talent, workforce considerations. So it's being that bridge is not easy in itself. And it's further complicated by this sort of like there's so many different political fiefdoms within our tri-county area. We are blessed that we are like a true metropolitan statistical area. Actually, I should say we were for a long, long time. We actually added one more county that is not part of the service territory elite because more of the traffic flow, the commuting patterns shifted from Flint to Lansing for that kind of rural county in between the two. So we added Shiawassee County into our MSA. But for a long time, it was like our tri-county is a true metropolitan statistical area, meaning that the flow of goods, services, and people naturally is kind of within that tri-county. And it's also like a tri-county area where the center is the urban core, there's a suburban ring, and then a rural is everything else. So it kind of flows naturally that way, which is nice. We know some regional EDOs that have like 8 to 10 counties, and
Yeah.
from one corner to the other, it's totally different culturally. It's totally different in terms of their dynamic and assets and things like that. And they don't really know each other.
No.
Right. So
It
that's
doesn't
what's nice
feel-
about our tri-county. Like we can know each other. It's not to say there's not, disagreements or legacy issues between warring municipalities that we have to deal with every once in a while. Cities and townships don't always get along. There's things about interlocal agreements and annexation and all sorts of things and it could be something that happened 50 years ago that is still, it's been passed along to government leaders today that they should still care about that thing. So there's distrust, and we have to kind of come in as that. I think it's good communication. It's building trust. It's building lines of communication between people that might not otherwise talk to each other. And Michigan is really hard because every little entity has its own elected officials. There is no unincorporated county in Michigan. It's all township, village, city. We have 80 different municipalities just in our little tri-county area. So
I did not realize that you have 80 municipalities within your tri-county area.
Yeah, and if you think about all the different entities that then, boards and appointed boards, elected boards, it's over 100, and they're all making decisions on different things. And regionalism is shared services sometimes too, So we've had big. I would say Mayor Verge Bernero was pretty unprecedented in the way he wanted to do regional economic development. He took his lead economic developer and said, "Go lead the regional thing." Bob Truzai is our CEO. That was in like 2011-ish, 2012. So that was really a key moment. He had shared services between East Lansing and Lansing for fire. And that was a big deal to have a fire department split between the 2 big cities. And then you get the urban rural divides and differences. So like Leap's in the middle of all that, trying to do projects, trying to develop sites. And different municipalities have different interests. Some don't want any industrial. Some only want new housing. Right. And we always have to talk to them about the region is the local economy. It's everything. And you can't get the housing you want if we don't help spur office and industrial growth in the broader area. If we're not retaining MSU students at a higher clip, housing's not going to go well in your community, right? So like, even if you're solely focused on that, and that's how you want to build your tax revenue, maybe you should also diversify. How can we help you think about? So we do a lot of that, just very fundamental education on like economic development.
Right. Some
that helps build
trust.
Yeah.
Keep your eye on the prize. Don't be distracted by the trees. Remember the forest, right, in your role.
And it's the whole
serving
picture.
as a mediator.
That's not easy when you're a little municipality with a few square miles, and you don't like your neighbor all that much. It's like, well, the neighbor has a role, and their success will help your success. You're not competing.
You might not like your neighbor, but you don't want your
globally.
neighbor. You don't want your neighbor's house to be on fire.
Yeah.
Right. How about that? You may not like your neighbor, but you don't want your neighbor's house to be on fire. But here's maybe a key takeaway from what you just said, because I've seen regions where, like you said, it's 8 to 10 counties, right? It's massive.
Yeah.
Like I'm just going to call them out, Greater Louisville Inc. Right. In fact, that's where we're met down in Louisville.
In Louisville.
They cover, I think it's 10 to 15 counties, and talk about a wrinkle in regionalism. They span across state borders.
Yeah,
they cover both Indiana counties and Kentucky counties. And to your point, right, how is it that somebody in Clark County, Indiana, can feel any way, shape, or form any connection to somebody down in the furthest southwest corner of that region, right? How do you...
And different states leveraging their tools, and that's just the natural competitive landscape, right?
Absolutely. And so maybe something that we just picked up on here is, if you're going to do regionalism, do it right. And by that, I mean define the boundaries of your region very intentionally from the beginning. Don't do it just to get as much land as possible under your auspices, right? Find the natural fit so that for you, right, the Tri-County region, sure, you've got squabbles, but everybody does. But it's a natural fit. It's kind of the ethos of the community by bringing together this Tri-County region, which makes you a powerful player, and it makes it easier for you to help lead the region forward.
And from the center of the region, you can literally get anywhere in the region within about a 30-minute drive. So it's even just the geographic navigation of it, because we've talked to people where it's like, it's a 2-hour drive to get to that part of the region. It's like, so you never go, right? It's just human nature. Like, you're going to spend less time there because it's far away.
Right.
So it's like us being tight and compact, I think, has really helped us build a really robust public-private partnership, where when we need to call on somebody, we know we have a relationship, we know them, even with changing hands, changing elected officials, and constant education, populism sweeping across the country. That's a battle of education and awareness. So there's challenges, but I think we have a really good platform and basis that we've built up over 10, 15 years.
So if somebody from another area of the country reached out to you and said, hey, we don't have a regional organization, we're thinking about doing it, we've heard that Lansing is doing it right? What advice would you give to them as far as thinking about how to stand it up? I mean, you all were lucky, it sounds like, in that the mayor kind of gave the edict to push forward and really focusing on regionalism. So you had a strong central leadership pushing out. But for maybe cities that don't have that, what would you recommend?
Well, I think it really started actually before Mayor Bernero in the city of Lansing give it that oomph. We had something called the RED team, Regional Economic Development Team, and that was almost entirely private sector business leaders, and maybe like 10 to 15, not a huge group, but some key business executives got together and said, like, what the heck's going on? We don't have a real regional organization doing the work, and we see Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor and Detroit and, Fort Wayne, Toledo, Columbus, all these communities, like, they're competing and winning projects. We're not even competing. Why is our region not even in the hunt? Because the apparatus didn't exist. So I think it's a lot of times it's going to be business owners, because, again, they have that self-interest. The government bureaucracies and things, like, they need to be set up culturally to do the right things. They can just kind of run in circles otherwise and not be super efficient or take on new initiatives, not really innovative to a fault, is a big critique of government. So it's like the government can get on board with elected officials, but it was really this business group that came to the elected officials and said, guys, we can do way better. We have these assets. We're a state capital. We have a Big Ten university. Why are we not, punching at the weight that we should be in the national competition or even just within the state of Michigan. And that was kind of the rallying cry for a while. And then politicians kind of picked up on that. But it was, so I guess to get back to what would be the advice would say, find your community advocates and leaders. And if they're business leaders, that helps because they carry a lot of weight with elected officials and things. So if you have an elected or a group of electeds that are going to be key to some sort of jurisdiction of a region, and they're not on board, find some business leaders because they have all sorts of incentive, their families, their employees, their own fortunes, their business fortunes with customers, and everyone needs population growth at some level, even if it's modest, to continuity, right? It's survival. Right. So you kind of play on that, find a base of people, and in any community, there's a base who are the biggest employers, who are key executives, and that have a passion for the region you're talking about. That's going to be the core group. And politicians
allow your private sector.
That's the core group.
Allow your private sector to lead from behind, right? Push this thing forward.
Right. And that they can help the government pieces, whether it's local EDCs or counties that have one staff, they can help that group come together. And it can kind of be like, it's not going to be two counties getting along just for the heck of it is really hard to do. But if you have a business group telling both counties, putting them in a room together and saying, guys, we can be better together. How do we shape this up, or just create good partnerships between your two organizations? And by the way, we'll fund you, right? You both have one staff. How about you both have 3 staff? We're going to pool the money to make that possible. And then maybe an apparatus of another regional organization comes along, but that could be a step that direction, a regional mandate whereby there's an actual financial boost to the local groups. So those are some things, but that's kind of how it came together for us. That red team was like 20 years ago, 15 years ago. And then LEAP kind of came out of that and then got supercharged when we had that big city contract. But now our membership alone is sustaining. We don't really need government contracts. We just do them when it makes sense, when it helps us boost capacity. So we're not dependent on any source because we have 80 members that are all paying every single year. We also don't do 5-year campaigns. Every single year we fundraise again. And if our product wasn't good enough, leave. And nobody does. We have 99% retention every single year, usually adding a handful of new members.
You are putting yourself up for referendum every year.
Exactly. And that's very irregular for economic development organizations.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people say, you guys are crazy. Like, why would you do that? But Bob's got it down to the science, and it works. And it's the closest we can do to say that we're at the speed of business. And look, if you're not content, you got the out. Don't sign up again in January. Like if you don't think we're doing a great job and making this community more prosperous and providing economic opportunity, then that's okay.
And then you get your feedback every year too, right? It's like an annual performance review.
Exactly.
Right, which makes you stronger as an organization and helps you do your job better. So,
and it helps us stay agile too. We don't rest on our laurels. We don't have some 5-year plan that we just chip away at. Like it's always actively go, go, go.
Yes, it is. As we mentioned, just some of the success you've had. So we're going to go to break real quick, and we're going to come back, and we're going to talk about you again, Keith. See you in a sec. All right, and we're back with Keith here. So, Keith, when you're not, at home trying to get sleep and trying to get your newborn to, just please sleep for more than 30 minutes, right? When you're actually in the office, what does a typical day look like for you as the COO of a regional economic development organization?
Yeah, it's varied is a good word. It's a big range. We're hybrid right now. So Mondays and Wednesdays, we're always in the office. But because of my role, because it's very personnel oriented, organizational happenings, I'm in the office more than that, typically at least 3-4 days a week. I'm usually trying to get either Tuesday or Friday would be my day to be in the home office and just cranking out, spreadsheet work. I'm doing a lot of grant admin and management. So that stuff gets pretty wild. But I'd say like a typical day, assuming I'm in the office, I try to spend a half hour to an hour just understanding what I need to accomplish that day. Getting through high priority emails, things like that. My days are usually filled with a lot of meetings, more meetings than I would like. because I have to, in a lot of times, manage departments or measurable review or whatever it might be. But I'm trying to set other people up to do their job successfully, kind of that next level. And then I'm thinking about my own tasks and activities. And then we have project meetings. We've had more company visits than ever before. I think we had like 15 just in the first quarter this year. So
Wow.
that keeps us busy. And I'm one of like 3 staff that are involved in hosting and coordinating those activities, and then actually participating, presenting on our region and things when we have companies from overseas or from around the country, oftentimes with consultant teams like yourself. So it's honestly, there's not really a typical day. And I love that about my job. I love that so much, that I'm going to be talking to different people. I do my best. I can get very zoned in, and even in the office, and just like crank out work, but I try to be social and engage with the team. And I mentioned we have a team of about 15. So I try to at least say hello, if not like ask about somebody's day, to every single person in the office every day. I probably don't live up to that, but it's at least a goal for me.
Something
to stay engaged.
Something that the former Secretary of Commerce for the state of Indiana, when I was working up there, something he would do, even though he was the head honcho and he was slammed, right, is every morning he would walk around with a basket of candy and find an opportunity to say hi to everybody in the office.
Yeah, I love that.
And it's just one of those that you knew that Victor was going to walk around with his candy.
Yeah.
To everybody, right? Even it didn't matter if you're the front desk receptionist, if you were stuck way in the back bullpens, account manager, if you were, one of the superstar rock star business development guys, right? It didn't matter who you were, what you were doing, he walked around. So I appreciate the fact that you understand that there's so much that you have to get done, but you still try to keep the pulse on your team, right? And be visible, right? Because in a leadership position, it's about being visible, and it's about leading by example, right? And so if you want people in the office, you need to be in the office. If you want people to become experts in their field within a couple of months, well, if they see you pick up something new, right, you better darn well become an expert in that in a couple of months, right? That's how the organization works.
Yeah.
But so that kind of parlays into the next point here. So you are out on paternity leave, right? And not all fathers are fortunate enough to have a strong organization where they can actually go and spend time with their young family, right?
Yeah.
Like you're able to do, right? So how do you set up, or how have you and Bob set up your office for success, given how much work there is these days, for you to be able to go off and do what you're supposed to do right now and take care of your family and be with your family?
Yeah, I would say a lot of this comes from leadership of both our board as well as Bob Trezise, our CEO, who's been at the helm since 2011, 2012. Talent is our top asset, and we've felt the pain of losing key people at tough times. And again, a team of 15, if you lose 1 or 2 in a 6-month span, that can wipe out a small department. That can wipe out a lot of knowledge that was built up over 5 or 10 years. I think on our team right now, there's 3 of us that have over 10 years experience. And then only maybe 2 or 3 after that have over 4 or 5 years experience.
Young team.
There's a lot of people that are like 2 to 4 year experience, and young in age and experience as well. So it makes that know-how really, really valuable. So employee retention is a focus. And we looked at all the sort of perks and benefits and things of working at Leap, and obviously compensation package overall, salary is important in that. But there's a lot more than salary. It's the work-life balance. We're very generous with PTO and holidays. And we kind of thought about, we actually had it. We went through someone that was having a baby, and they're like, what about parental leave? Like, what are the options? And at that point, like, as a small organization, we didn't even have a short-term disability package. So like the typical 6 to 8 weeks of leave, and we're not like big enough to be guided or be regulated under the Family Medical Leave Act, FMLA. So it was like very limited, and just the uncertainty, right? Of like, you can take unpaid leave, but you're not guaranteed a job to come back to. And so we were like, we should really shape up policy around this. And then in that use case, we're like, we should have parental leave, and we don't want it to only be for the mom, right? So we're going to have a leave policy. And it's kind of evolved from there. But right now you get a 6-week benefit of just, 6-week paid leave for parental leave. And then you can stack on top of that with your paid time off, holidays stack on top of that. So you can have up to a 12-week
You can
leave.
extend it, right?
Yes. And then moms are, taking advantage of short-term disability either for 6 or 8 weeks, which pays 60%. LEAP pays the rest. So it's going to be individualized, but it's up to 12 weeks off. And in my case, I get that 6-week benefit. Then I'm using about a month of PTO. Then some holidays are mixed in, and I get almost 11 weeks off, which is absolutely tremendous. And I'm Canadian, so I'm very biased in this because in Canada, both mom and dad get a year that they can split up however they like.
Right.
Which is crazy. And a lot of Europe's like that too. So when I talk to my Canadian family, they're like, "Oh, that's all." But then I talk to my friends and family here in the States, and they're like, "That's amazing.
You actually get time off."
Exactly. Well, and even
right.
Lauren's taking 12 weeks, and like a lot of women aren't able to take 12 weeks off, which is, just the first half of that is just physical recovery. It's from birth. Like it's a serious ordeal to go through that for your body. So absolutely. Yeah, this is a roundabout way to say it, but it's just so important. And we have a lot of people. We have someone else that'll be taking advantage of a leave for parental leave, like a month after I come back. So I think it's helping us in terms of retaining people and just having people feel good about like your employer cares about you. That's an important message.
Having strong policies, right, show that the employer cares, but it also sets certainty, right? That as a team that, okay, Keith just told all of us that they're expecting a baby, right? So we all need to be prepared. We know where this is going. We need to be prepared to step up, right, in his absence, right? As we've seen, right? You've had team members rallying and keeping all of the work going and allowing you to focus on what matters most right now, that precious baby girl of yours, right?
Exactly.
And by the way, did we ever make this connection? Did we ever make the connection that we're both Canadian living in the States?
I think so. I don't know. I feel like we talked about that at some point.
Okay. All right.
I think that was part of my affinity to you. I'm like, this guy is the answer.
This dude's got something about him, right? There's something Commonwealthian about him that just yeah. And actually going back to I think earlier that you said how you talked about how you got into economic development. You actually, despite what you said, and everybody I asked that question to, everybody says, well, nobody gets into it. Nobody thinks they're going to get it. You were about as close as it gets to actually plotting your future into economic development while you were in college, right?
When I was a junior or senior in college, my dream job, my vision for where my career was headed was like World Bank, International Monetary Fund, which is like economic development at a global scale, and then from there, I kind of just changed the lens from global or national to local. But yeah, it was really economic development. I picked up on that as an interest area, but I had no idea what the practitioner looked like. Like business retention, expansion, attraction, entrepreneurial development, workforce development. None of that was really, it was all in the sense of like international development academia, which is totally different. Totally.
You assume that the gigs were only focused on Southeast Asia, right? Yeah. And you didn't even think about, it's in your backyard. I'm sitting here looking at behind you, right, in your home office, and you're a very proud Michigander. I can see that very clearly, right? But I also see some trophies down there.
Yeah.
So Keith, you as a person here, what are you? We've talked about work. What are you passionate about outside of work, right? What drives you as a person? Like, what were these trophies for?
Those trophies are for volleyball. I really love beach volleyball. I just played last night. Every Thursday I'm on a league that I've been on since I came back. I played a lot of twos when I was in South Carolina on Isle of Palm, so that was really cool. Actual beach volleyball on the beach. Yeah. Now some people are like, you got to call it sand volleyball. So you're not on a beach. You can't. Like, come on, man.
Hey, Michigan has beaches, just not Lansing.
Yeah. The Havens, they have like some really big competitive volleyball going on all the time, and leagues and stuff that are touring around the country. Obviously, it's a summertime thing, but yeah. Right. So I really like volleyball. I'm just a huge outdoors lover in general. My wife and I have done a lot of traveling around the world, mostly to places with natural beauty. We do a lot of hiking, kayaking, get out on the water however we can. Love, summiting mountains, climbing down into valleys to find waterfalls, and we've done a lot of that, especially through the pandemic and everything. As that was the only one of the few safe activities, and we got dirt cheap flights to Denver to go to Rocky Mountains, and Jackson Hole to go to the Tetons in Yellowstone, and we got over to Hawaii and did some awesome hikes in Kauai and the Big Island. Iceland recently.
There's nothing better than a full day of hiking and finally summiting the top, right?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's so rewarding.
The peace that washes over you.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's for me, I'm like a workaholic just in general, and to a fault sometimes. And I think, honestly, before having a baby, I'll say that because before having a baby, one of the few things I could do to really get my mind off work was go hiking and do something rigorous where like my body and my mind are like connected around my natural environment, but also the goal of getting to that peak or getting to that waterfall or whatever we're like set out to do. So that was like the best way. I would say also like game time in volleyball was another one, but now that I've had a baby, it's like work is, I mean, it's secondary and not in a bad way. And I'm excited to go back to work in about
secondary.
A month,
doesn't have to be bad, man.
It's just a priority shift, you know, like work was always, I was building a family. I wanted to do all that, but having a baby girl and I'm literally responsible for her life, you know, like it's different. It's just different. So I love my work life. I'm eager to get back to it, but it helps me.
You're going through a paradigm shift.
Yeah, it is. It's a whole paradigm shift. And
right. And that's something I have
the work is super important, but it's not family, you know?
No. Now, another thing, by the way, if you want to be a really progressive organization as far as leaves are concerned, we've talked about this earlier, and you're going to hate me for saying it, but like give people a week off when they get a puppy. Like when you get a puppy, give us a week off, a puppy leave, right? Dog rental rights or something. But no, that's fantastic. You guys have actually put that policy in place, and it's allowing you in real time to get out and be with your family and kind of recharge a bit, and then you'll get back in and ready to hit it, right? So
and there's and you mentioned the part about extraordinary teams. I mean, we're a big believer in hiring exceptional people, and people have to step up. You know, like me being gone in my COO role, that means our CEO has to step up big time. That means the rest of the department of regional growth, which is the business attraction, retention, expansion, county contracts, site readiness grants, a lot of stuff like that is all in a department of 3 people. It's like that, you know, Emma is stepping up. I know you've interacted with Emma. She's been phenomenal. So it's like those 2 roles, it's spread across the organization, but those 2 roles particularly have to step up. Our CFO is doing different and more things in grant management than he's used to. So I think that's part of it too, is like having a close, cohesive, connected team where people both like each other and respect and appreciate each other. That's huge, because otherwise you can't really do it. Otherwise you're just going to have people be, you know, almost like you come back and they're pissed because it's like it was an unfair burden. But like people step up, and you know, we figure it all out. So that's a big piece of it too. Like I can leave knowing that things are in good hands.
The cool thing here, right, with you out of the way, or you know, if anybody steps out, right, and there's a void, you start to see where there's other opportunities and hidden talent within your organization.
That's true,
right?
Too.
Because folks step in to fill that void.
Right.
They step up. All of a sudden, you realize, wow, this person who was, you know, one of our staff accountants is actually really good on the phone with prospects. Yeah. We didn't ever expect that because that's not what we hired him or her for. Mm-hmm. But you know, maybe we need to consider, you know, having them be part of like the financial analysis and responsiveness team for business development prospects, right? And allow them to get on the phone with these folks. So anyways, so that being said, we're going to take one more break here. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about Lansing and Greater Lansing and the future of Lansing and allow you to promote the community a bit here. Right. And then we're going to wrap. This has been great, man. Talk to you all in a sec. All right, and we are back, Keith. So we're going to flip this around. I'm sick of talking about you. Let's talk about your community. All right, man. So this is a question that I think really helps to open the conversation about a community. What is your vision for Greater Lansing's economic future in the next 5 to 10 years? Where are you all going?
I think our Lansing region, you know, it's experiencing a really interesting, it's had a nice growth spurt since the Great Recession. We kind of rocked through that pretty well. And now, kind of weathering the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, we want to be a top regional economy, Four Seasons regional economy. So we kind of look at our competition as across the US Midwest, and we look to cities like Columbus and Madison that have similar assets, the Big Ten University, the capital city. And that's really what we aspire to. We're also, very cognizant of being in that center position in the state. We want to be the connector with Detroit and Grand Rapids and Ann Arbor and Kalamazoo on med device and life sciences. We our home and place and industry with the electric vehicles and battery making is pretty I'd say pretty stable right now, but we see a lot of growth opportunities in that life sciences, med tech, the food processing and agricultural technologies. So that's I think my vision is that we would see those industries continue to foster new opportunities, that we'd have success attracting new market entrants, expand the ones we already have. And we want to, as we do that, be really good about building up. I mentioned the technician level talent, but within our community, we have very just phenomenal diversity within the community as well as diversity within the international students at MSU. So I think it's build, foster, retain, nurture, all of the above, so we can continue to capitalize on our talent assets we have, which are remarkable for a region of 500,000 people to graduate 15, 16,000 every single year. That's
huge.
That's huge, right? So leveraging that, I think is something we're learning how to do. And we've had a really strong 5 or 10 years, but I want to see that supercharged over the next decade. So we are that place where, the macro level talent and workforce data will show consultants, industry executives, whoever might be looking, that, we're checking all the boxes of Gen Z and millennial talent and, increasing. And population growth is a big one, because Michigan.
Population growth.
So population growth, just incremental. We're not trying to grow like gangbusters, but right now we're facing demographic challenges as a country, particularly rural areas in the state and rural areas in our region. Population is right there at a very tenuous, even dropping in certain places. So that's a big deal. And part of that is helping to retain our international students. It's a messy process to go from student visa to work visa. We got to figure that out and get better at that. And we've got some partners helping on that front. And then keeping people happy that are here when they get educated, that's domestic students as well. So I think a lot of it is around building. The place has been built nicely. Our urban core, that was a focus the last 10 or 15 years. Placemaking, cultivating an urban core that's compelling. We've done that. Now I think it's all about the industry growth, getting population growth, tracking the right way again. Big time talent attraction campaign to show off the place. The place is not what people think of it. Even parents of kids that are going to MSU, like they think of Lansing from maybe early 2000s when it wasn't much to look at and there wasn't connection to East Lansing and there wasn't, all this river activation and amazing craft coffee and breweries and things like that. So part of it is just that, like getting that out there. And we work with the CVB, the Chamber, groups like that to tell that story. But it's a compelling metro and it's affordable. We combine all those things and you can still get a lot of house for $250,000 in the Lansing area. And that's not something that too many markets in the country can say anymore.
Well, and to your point about the downtown, right? When I was up there, I told you, hey, is there a good bar I can go to? I just need to get some work done before I head home, right? And I forget the name of the bar, but I stopped by this little hole in the wall. And it was so small, like they didn't even serve food. Like you had to go next door to the like the brisket place, right? To get
food. You're right, Real Town Pub, right?
Yes, I was. But what was cool to me, right? Such a small little spot, and that was like a Thursday night or something, and it was packed, and it wasn't all college kids. You would have assumed it was all college kids. It was like a running group that had come in, right? And
that's like the neighborhood pub too. All you runners come in.
Yeah, just such a vibrant downtown, right? Yeah. And I mean, for me, prior to coming up there, I thought of Lansing as capital of Michigan and the car capital of North America, right? Yeah. Which both of those are true. Right. But I never thought about, having this placemaking that you all had done and having such a vibrant downtown. I figured it'd be like any other, Midwestern small city, right, that kind of had some decaying downtown and things are being pushed out to the fringes. Not even close to true. Very evenly developed. And I mean, it's just a compelling little downtown that I almost booked a hotel that night. Like I was so
Yeah.
curious. Like I wanted to go try a cafe in the morning, but then I went, well,
Yeah.
again, puppy at home, right? So,
Right. Yeah.
so do you see in 5-10 years still being known as the car capital of North America, right? You're not going to lose that, right? Because as we mentioned before, GM making this massive investment in
Yeah.
electric vehicles, right? But you still see 5-10 years from now, still automotive being your bread and butter, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we see kind of that in manufacturing and technology sectors that Ultium, the General Motors supply chain, it's pivotal to retain and continue to grow that. Ultium is the EV transition, and our assembly plants are seeing hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, retooling, and things for electric vehicles. So I think the EV capital is a big part of the vision, but we also have to bring in more battery materials, cathodes, anodes, and land projects like that are going to Indiana and Ohio left and right. We really like the idea of landing some pieces of the semiconductor value stream that we just don't have a marquee chip project yet. We've competed for some of the biggest in North America and been this close. So we think we can do from large fab to the packaging to the fabless manufacturing. There's a lot of things that we have the knowledge and know-how, particularly thanks to Michigan State, but even the technician talent with a great technical college. We can kind of do that in a compact way with enough labor force, but also not, dealing with the issues of being a top 10, top 20 metro area where you're overpopulated, don't have transportation infrastructure. We have great transportation infrastructure. If anything, we're underbuilt. We have a lot of land. There's a perception around, well, we want to keep rural, but I mean, we're underdeveloped as a region over the last 20, 30 years. So that's part of the education that LEAP is trying to do, to say that, look, we have to think about regional planning over the longer term to say we need some more industrial property. Our industrial parks are mostly filled up that were built out in the 80s and 90s. We need a second wave. So that's something that LEAP's very actively working on right now. So I see semiconductor. I mentioned we're really proactive about the life sciences, med tech, and the food. Those are both directly in parallel to MSU's strengths, right? They started out as an ag college. They have amazing food science, food safety, food packaging. Supply chain is number one in the world. So from farm to refrigerator or farm to table, we can do everything along the way with food value add. And medical is the same sort of thing. Our big health system just got bought by U of M, which is one of the, Michigan Health is one of the best brands in the world. So that's our local medical now. And Michigan State University, of course, has their medical schools here. Their vet med as well. So we have a lot of assets in healthcare and advancing healthcare. We even have the facility for rare isotope beams, which is discovering new medical isotopes, which are fighting and curing cancers and things. So we have some niche capabilities that are as good as anybody in the world. So a lot of it is storytelling, and a lot of people just don't know about these things in our community. So this is another reason I was so excited to talk with you, is just to get the word out a little bit that Lansing, Michigan has a lot of unique assets and is doing some cool things.
What was the other thing that you had told me about, or maybe Bob did, the particle accelerator?
Yeah, that's the FRIB. Yep.
Okay. So that was got it.
That's another sort of capital of North America particle accelerator. We have two companies that, they're headquartered in San Francisco, but where do they do their R&D and manufacturing? Lansing, right? And because of the talent of building particle accelerators at MSU, and we had one of the first nuclear physics programs in engineering particle accelerators back in the 50s and 60s. We've been doing that for a long time, and that's why the federal government picked us to be the home of the FRIB, which has been $1 billion investment over the last 10 or 15 years. And it's huge.
So much more.
The biggest
more than just the car capital of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, and we don't want to lose that. But particle accelerator, we want to do more with semiconductor. We want to scale and diversify different pieces of manufacturing and technology. But we see those sectors as critical. We can't get away from that. You can't just focus on placemaking. No. And you can't just focus on tech startups, right? You have to be balanced. And our industrial heritage and legacy is a big part of our strength, because we make things. We're really good at making things. We can do the high tech and science and physics, but you need to actually make it. And I don't want to lose that. I don't think the country wants to lose that. And we need to be the factory of the world again. And Michigan and Lansing can be a big part of that story. They are.
So let's test your prowess as the VP of Business Attraction here, right? The last question that I'm going to ask you is because I know every site selector in the industry listens to this podcast.
Every single one.
Every single one, right? Every single one. This will be compelling. This will be a required 101 to site selection, listening to site selectors or people too. But what would you like to say to them about Lansing, about what unique opportunities Lansing offers to businesses and investors, and how you can support their clients? I'll let you go with that, and that'll be the final question, man. I want you to have the spotlight here.
Yeah, I think I always think of our region. I mentioned, underdeveloped for 50 years, let's say, when we were in the exact same position as Columbus, Ohio, 70 years ago, about the same population. And they've gone like this while we've been, kind of flatlined. But we're hitting a tipping point and we're changing our trajectory. So it's a classic buy low, sell high type situation. The value proposition is you're getting in, not on the ground floor, but we're still very affordable, both from a cost of doing business as well as a talent acquisition, what you have to pay engineers, software designers, accountants. It's, pennies on what you would have to do just over in Chicago, 3.5 hours away. And you can access this amazing talent that we have, the pipeline between the community college, Michigan State University. It's all right here in that kind of hyper localized sense. So if you locate something here, you can tap into all that. You have lower risk because you're getting in on that ground floor. The cost of doing business is going to be lower. You're going to be able to get to the point that you can really maximize what your business is trying to achieve. And you have the supply chain pieces of Detroit, put the world on wheels, and Detroit, Lansing, Grand Rapids. What we have in the supply chain is robust. And that's not just for cars. That's for aerospace. That's for semiconductor. Metals, chemicals, plastics. We make it as good as anybody. And we have phenomenal design engineering type talent. So you can tap into all of it. You get in relatively low cost and, take advantage of the assets. They're here and we're wanting to do more. And I think particularly with international businesses, we've seen a lot of success because they're so focused on New York, LA. When you start talking to them about, the heartland and a place like Michigan, they love it. They love it. And the lakes and the lifestyle and everything else and balance, being able to breathe. Those are also things that we've heard from folks coming to visit us from afar.
It's not every day that you can get in on the ground floor of an opportunity like Lansing that already has a strong business case, right? And that's what you're saying. I mean, you have a strong foundation in your community, right? But you're ready to go to the next level. Yep. Right. And, because you have an abundance of land in the region, folks can still get in at a lower price, lower risk because of all the assets. Right. And so you can buy into a really high value proposition at, lower than what the market's calling for. Right. Yep. That's a huge selling point. So I'm going to test your prowess on something else here. So I'm going to give a fun fact. Right. Okay. Something I forgot to mention before. So you had mentioned the Rio Cafe. I didn't know this before, but Lansing is home to where they made the truck that REO Speedwagon was named after. Right.
Yep.
The band.
Yeah.
How cool was that? I mean,
Ransom Eli Olds is a contemporary of Henry Ford. Okay, so my fun fact will be related to him. He was his first motor company. He was actually making steam-powered engines at this point, but he was the first guy ever to attempt to export a motor vehicle outside the United States. And he sent it to a customer in India. And it was in sometime in the 1890s. It was the first time a motor vehicle was ever exported outside the U.S.
Okay, you said attempt. It was successful. It was successful. He got it there?
Well, I said attempted because I think it was lost at sea. And then our vibrant insurance industry was able to get involved. So.
Right. All right, so there's a fun fact, but you are a new father. Do you you have to have a good dad joke for us?
So my boss said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So I went in as Batman.
Yeah, you're going to be an excellent father, man. Keith, dude, it's always a pleasure talking to you. This has been a fantastic discussion, man. You guys are rocking it up there. You're just such a good dude, and I couldn't be more pleased to know you.
Thanks, Devin. Pleasure. I really enjoyed getting to know you over the last year or two.
Absolutely. So, folks, thanks again for tuning in to Site Selectors for People Too. This has been Stories from the Road with Keith Lambert with the Lansing Economic Area Partnership. And this is episode 1 of season 2. So there's plenty more to come, and I look forward to talking to you all, because guess what? Site selectors are people too. Just a heads up, views expressed in this podcast are solely my own and are not attributable to any employers, whether past or present. Thank you.